Chico Resch. You are listening to the Let's Go Devils podcast on the Primetime Radio Network.
Happy Devils Monday. This is the Woo Report. The Woo Report, episode 290, with our special guests from Vermont, Bruce Zeman of Vox Media, AM/FM, as we're streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network, coming to you live from the Primetime Radio Studios bunker in New Jersey, in an undisclosed location under a couple inches of snow. Bruce is in Vermont. Bruce, how are you, my friend?
Sam, great to be on the Woo Report. It's a little chilly up here.
It definitely is. Bruce, for those that don't know Bruce is a good friend of the podcast. We've had him since season 2, maybe season 1, a few years ago. You are an NHL analyst. Also, in full disclosure, been with the team since, I guess your dad with the team since 1982. You've worked for the team. If you don't mind me going through your bio, also was the Devils mascot way back when, and also have done a lot of other things. You have the number one radio show up in Vermont, the Wake Up Crew with Bruce and Friends on 92.1 FM, WVTK, and also a great friend of the podcast. I'm trying to pump your tires, Bruce. Am I doing a good job?
Listen, man, I am so honored to be on the podcast with you. It's so amazing to see where you are right now. I remember when you first started this, and it's just really, it says a lot about the professionalism that you bring to this, and I'm just so glad that you've been as successful as you are, because it's really great to see.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Really appreciate it. And, I was just telling you off air about our $500,000 party at American Whiskey last Saturday. And to the audience that don't know, there was a lot that was put into that party. And before we start talking about Timo Meier, Fitzgerald, and New Jersey Devils, we did 2 podcasts the day after. And you've got to think about, after partying hard with your fans at American Whiskey, to come back and have the wherewithal to actually do not 1 but 2 podcasts after American Whiskey, and poor Scotty that takes a red eye on a Friday night from LA to join our party. It was a 24-hour whirlwind, and then the Timo Meier trade comes about while he's in mid-flight, probably around Denver, Colorado, back to L.A., gets off the plane, and literally gets to his seat for the 9 p.m. Eastern Sunday edition of the Let's Go Devils podcast. That's dedication, but there's a lot of things to be excited about. Let's start with the Timo Meier trade, Bruce. What are your thoughts? Let's start with, did you want Timo Meier before this trade, and how do you feel after seeing the deal after the trade? Let's start from there.
Well, I think that's a great question, Sam. I mean, I think the Devils had to do something. There have been rumors for months that they were a suitor to get Timo over here. The Islanders did something. They had Bo Horvat. The Rangers did something with Tarasenko. And so you kind of thought that Fitz was going to try to do something to bring in a big power forward, and he did. I think he definitely improved the team. I think, in my opinion, looking at this, and it was funny because you and I were texting back and forth last night while this was going on, there was just a list of players that were included, that weren't included. It took a while to figure out who was actually going. In fact, up here in the New England media, there were actually rumors at one point that Dawson Mercer was in that trade, that Akira Schmid was in the trade, which I would not have done. But I think as long as the Devils at some point are able to get Meier signed to an extension, I think it'll be a good trade for New Jersey.
Yeah, and you know what I think probably happened? I think a lot of these speculation, these rumors, had some truth to it, because the art of the deal here is it's constantly evolving and changing as time goes along. So what may happen at 4 p.m. could be a different world at 4:35 p.m. during negotiations, so to speak. I think what happened here was as time went along, which I think this is where the Devils and the Devils fans got lucky here, teams were dropping out. The New York Rangers folded. They went to their plan B. Tarasenko, they tried to jack up the price, possibly. Carolina Hurricanes, Vegas Golden Knights, they were rumored to be in it. But at the end of the day, if the Devils were the last one standing, Tom Fitzgerald had the leverage at that point to make those tweaks because he was asking for possibility of trying to get extensions going, and the San Jose Sharks wouldn't allow it. And it is a gamble, in my opinion, Tom Fitzgerald, of making this deal. But when you look at the actual fine print of it, I think he covered his bases, especially with that conditional 2024, potentially that second rounder becoming a first round pick. I actually I can live with this deal at this point.
Yeah, and I think, you have to keep in mind, too, look at who Meier's representative is. I mean, it's Claude Lemieux. He knows a lot about this franchise. They've done business before. And, there were some rumblings that came out earlier this afternoon in the New England media that the Devils representatives and Meier's representatives have at least framed out what an extension might look like. I don't think that you make a deal like this if there's no chance of an extension being signed. I don't care how good he is. You and I were talking off air. The Devils are a very good team right now. I think it's good that they got Meier. I don't think it would have been terrible if they didn't get Meier. I think that I would not have given up a Dawson Mercer or an Akira Schmid to get him here. But, again, I think it's a case that in the media availability last night, he came out. I think he said the right things. He said he wanted to win. And one of the things that I'll get to later, if we have the opportunity, is I think this is a moment where you have one of the legends of the team, whether it's Marty or Scott Stevens or one of the other Devils legends, you take him through the Prudential Center and you point to the top of the ceiling and say, you know what, you want your number to be up there at some point. You want to win. Well, this is the place where it's going to happen. I mean, he said the right things in the interview. He's a great player. I think he's going to make some of the other players better. And I think it's a good deal. I think as long as you can get him signed, and I think they will, I think it'll work out well for the Devils. They did not give up that much.
In retrospect, you're correct on that. And that was my biggest anxiety and fear all along, is how much is it going to cost for Timo Meier? When you hear rumors and rumblings of Dawson Mercer's name in the mix, I mean, there was several reporters. One, Robert Aiken of NorthJersey.com, tweeting it out that his sources were saying that his name, Dawson Mercer, was being floated around. And I didn't want to hear any of it. Because I felt Dawson Mercer was a steal of the 2020 draft. And I don't want Dawson Mercer, and neither does any Devils fan, to want him to get, taken from the Devils. But again, I think time, believe it or not, it's not usually in these cases, but I don't think time was on San Jose's side. And I think right now where that leverage was is the Devils were the last team standing, and they were able to make this monster blockbuster move. But my question to you, Bruce, we talking about signing extension. How is Claude Lemieux as an agent? Do you know anything about his, to me, I don't know. When I think of Claude Lemieux, I think about all those contract negotiations with Lou Lamoriello that just went stale, and then he gets traded, and then he comes back for a second tour of duty, wins a cup again with the Devils, and then he's off gallivanting to another team. What's Claude like as an agent?
I mean, I would imagine I don't know personally, but I do know he does know this is a franchise with a tradition of winning that is trying to get back to that. And I think that he knows that they seemingly are on the right track. It was interesting because earlier this week, and I can't remember in what medium I saw it in, but GM Fitzgerald said that, in his opinion, the Devils were about a year ahead of schedule. So it's almost like they were sort of playing with house money at this point. I don't think and I know a lot about this team, as do you. I don't think there's any Devils analyst anywhere that thought that they would have the record that they have right now at this point. So I think that Claude knows what this organization brings, and I think for the first time in maybe a decade, we've talked about this before when I've been on your show, they're relevant for the first time in 10 years. And I think that's a nice thing to see, and we'll see what the negotiations bring. I mean, there's a whole bunch of variables with this. I mean, one of the things, I was on another podcast this afternoon that I was talking about in terms of the money for Timo Meier. I'm not sure how you pay him more than Jack Hughes. I think that's something that they may have to work out internally. I don't know if you're going to go more than $8 million for him. The numbers that were being floated yesterday was that he wants $9 million. Now, this is going to sound kind of crazy for the average person like you and I, but $1 million in terms of a contract negotiation of this size is not really a big deal. So they're not that far apart. It's just a question of how do you not completely upset the salary structure of the team, since Jack Hughes, I believe right now, is the highest paid player. I think he is anyway. And I don't know if you give someone a bigger contract than that right now. I don't know how you address that internally.
It's all about the framework and the mindset. Right now, Jack Hughes is on his second contract right now, 8 years. A brilliant contract. Just like any good, investor, you get in at the right time. And Jack Hughes was just about to explode. Remember, he came back from that shoulder injury against the Kraken last season, and then voila, suddenly signs an 8-year, $8 million extension. We were all happy because we saw the potential of that being just a steal in years 5, 6, 7, and 8. And Timo Meier, obviously older than Jack Hughes, 26 years old, entering his prime. You could make a case. I mean, look what with Dougie Hamilton. He was the free agent prize. He's making what? Nearly $9 million a year? Is that his contract?
I think so.
9.7. So it's not really like what you're saying. It's not like they're far apart. And
no, they're not.
And I think from a salary structure standpoint, even if you go up to 9, I mean, that's got to be it. That's got to be like the absolute threshold. For the New Jersey Devils is absolute 9, because that's where Dougie's at. And Timo Meier is not, they still have, they could still qualify him at 10. But I think Timo Meier's sake, I mean, from what I've been reading, the W word is finally in the New Jersey Devils category, winning.
Yeah.
And one thing that, the content team of the New Jersey Devils put out is that he hates losing. And I remember talking about this second game of the season about Miles Wood. I wrote on pucksandpitchforks.com that the Devils hate losing than they do winning. And they were 0-2 at the time when that was happening. And it just seems like they're building that kind of culture. And I'm all about that culture where you just absolutely hate losing more than actually winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have created a new culture. And, it was very interesting the other night, Sam. I was watching the reunion of the 2003 Stanley Cup championship team. I was watching it on television up here. And one of the things that struck me, I don't know if you got this, maybe it's just something that, as a longtime fan, it hit me. I was watching the players, and it's hard to believe that was 20 years ago.
Yeah,
it was
I know.
20 years ago that they hoisted the cup last time. But to me, and I've said this to you other times on this podcast, given where the Devils are now in terms of building a new culture and building a winning culture, getting back to where they expect to win more than they hate to lose, like you just alluded to a minute ago,
Yep.
I still think that however they have to do it, I think that when I was looking at that group of players sitting around the cup, I saw Scott Stevens in the middle of that group of players. However they do it, they somehow have to bring him back into this organization and put him in a management role so he can mentor some of those players. If they can do it with Marty, they have to figure a way to do it with him.
They have to. I completely agree. Scott Stevens is the fabric, the foundation of this winning organization. I mean, he was the first to have his jersey retired, captained 3 Stanley Cup teams. Just his credentials itself, his resume itself deserves to take a look at. And you know what? I completely agree with you. Winning breeds winning. And Marty Brodeur, when you're sitting in a room with Marty Brodeur, Scott Stevens, Scott Niedermeyer, the big three, and I would even put Sergei Brelin because I think he's done a great job with his coaching staff, being an assistant coach with the current team. Again, I think that's the kind of culture they want. And, I completely agree with you. Bring a little bit of the past, but move forward with the future with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier.
I mean, if you think about it, Sam, how many organizations have one of the greatest defensemen that's ever played the game in a broadcast booth doing their games at times? I don't really know, and I guess, you're not sitting in the room and you don't know what exactly happened. We've alluded to that before. You don't know what went on. But, I mean, I just don't see how they don't make some effort to bring him into the fold somehow. They did it with Marty, and, I mean, if you remember, he didn't leave. It wasn't too warm and fuzzy when he left.
No, not at all.
So I think you need to somehow make him whole and get him back in here because they're on the point where they're starting to go back up now, and I think that you want him to be part of that. A lot of people disagree with me when I say this, but those banners in the rafters do not happen without Scott Stevens.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Bruce. I mean, he was the focal point of the team. I mean, he kept everybody together. I mean, Scott Stevens didn't need to yell when he walked in the locker room. He was already a big presence. I mean, even we had Cam Jansen on a couple times on this podcast, and he would tell that story how he met Scott Stevens. It was basically Scott Stevens putting his hands on his shoulders, and he didn't know it was Scott Stevens. That kind of thing. I mean, he had an aura about him, respect from all the players, by the way, and also the opponents. Because when Scott Stevens on the ice, you better watch your head. You can't have your head down. He would get you at your most vulnerable moment.
I mean, he changed the entire complexion of games. And, if you listen to anybody, whether it's on, the NHL Network or on YouTube or any of the videos, when you see a player say, and they'll admit it, that they wouldn't go on that side of the ice because he was there, that is changing the entire dimension of a game.
Like Lawrence Taylor of the New York Giants.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he would drive people nuts. Same with Scott Stevens. Anytime he was out on the ice, he was going to shut your top line down completely. But moving forward, Bruce. So now Timo Meier's with the team. The Devils' top six. Solid, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say so. And, again, one of the other players that has been kind of quiet that was supposed to be their big, off-season acquisition, Andre Palat, he's back. I don't think he's putting up the numbers that I had hoped he would put up. But, if you get him going, then you've got a pretty solid six.
Yeah, and, I'm waiting for Palat in the playoffs. Him and Haula, I still believe in Haula for whatever reason. I think he's just going to break out because he doesn't do you agree with me here? Like, do you think Haula does all the little things right except for finish?
Well, and one of the other things too, Sam, is that however many points Haula has now or Palat has, no one's going to care if they have a fantastic postseason.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you play for. And again, they put up 10, 12 goals in the playoffs. They're rock stars regardless of what they did during the regular season.
Yeah. And Lindy Ruff said earlier today that Timo Meier, would be paired up with either Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier. I'm wondering who is going to be playing on that third line because we've said this on the podcast. That third line was so inconsistent for many years up until this season. And with the amount of depth on the top six, it's scary to think, if it all works out, that the Devils literally could roll four lines into the playoffs. When you have the big line, the fourth line, the energy line, so to speak, and lines 1, 2, and 3, that it's scary. I mean, that just seems like they can wear out their opponents and just keep on attacking. Just attack all game long.
Well, every line that they throw out there can bring offense. Yeah. And, there's no glaring weakness, especially now. I mean, there's no line that you're going to put out there and just hope that they don't give up something or an odd man rush or something like that. I mean, they're a pretty solid team, and it's going to be very interesting come playoff time. I mean, the buzz up here in New England, I think it's probably true, is that the Eastern Conference champion is going to somehow have to go through Boston. And that's going to be an interesting playoff run. I mean, because as I said today on another podcast I was on, is that going through the East is just going to be a war of attrition this year. It really is, because all the teams have improved themselves, whether it's the Rangers, the Devils, the Rangers, the Islanders. It's going to be a battle to come out of the East. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget Carolina, and the Devils can make that push. I don't know if you saw the interview with Craig Button on TSN earlier today. He was trying to make a kind of a comparison what Tom Fitzgerald is doing, who was with the Pittsburgh Penguins at the time as the assistant GM, and what they were doing the Pittsburgh Penguins, Sidney Crosby and Malkin in 2008, and comparing it to what they're doing in 2023 with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, that, going for that push. If you remember correctly, I believe they acquired Marian Hossa, if you remember that year, where they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals but lost to the Detroit Red Wings, which was the last gasp of their dynasty with Nicholas Lidstrom. Do you agree with that comparison?
I don't think it's wrong. When Fitzgerald said that they're a year ahead of where he planned to have them, that was good to hear, because I think, and this is not a criticism, but we've talked about this, like prior to this season, there have been some instances where you're kind of scratching your head, like, what is their plan?
Yeah.
Like, What are you doing? And now we seem to have a plan. And, watching them, even up here in New England, I catch a lot of their games. Jack Hughes is definitely going to be the franchise's first 50-goal scorer. He's going to be their first 100-point player. And, the same thing, Nico's amazing. And I think it's a great comparison. It just, I wouldn't be too unhappy with a trip to the Stanley Cup Finals this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So I looked at the roster of the 2008 Pittsburgh Penguins that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. It's a heck of a roster. You're talking about Sergei Gonchar, Marian Hossa. Like, they were pretty loaded. And on top of that, we have that term beefalytics in this on this podcast. But they had, like, Gary Roberts. They had Brooks Orpik. They had some real tough guys to go along with a young Chris Letang, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. So I could see Craig Button's, comparison, but I still think that Tom Fitzgerald is not done, because I've talked about it on this podcast, and I think Timo Meier's a start. They just need to get a little nasty, a little bit more nasty up front, maybe with on the bottom six, but also on defense as well. What are your thoughts?
On a show that I was on earlier today, one of the names that I threw out there, and this is someone that no one is talking about, at least that I've heard, I have always loved, and I would always love to add to our team a player like Milan Lucic from the Calgary Flames.
Of course.
I know a lot of people don't like him, but Tom Wilson from the Capitals would make life definitely interesting, in Newark. Or even Max Domi with a little offensive flair, and he's got some sandpaper too. So, I agree with you though. I think they do need to get a little bit nastier in that regard, because they don't really have that player that's gonna drop the mitts. I mean, Miles would sort of, but like I was still bummed a year or so back when they traded Wayne Simmons. I really liked him. or Brian Boyle for that matter.
Yeah.
They don't really have that player right now, and they think they need to get someone like that.
Yeah, because you know what, it's starting to get less and less and less. But there were times where like some of these teams, like the Florida Panthers, for example, beating up on Nico Hischier for no apparent reason other than they made up an excuse, right? It's just like, okay, he accidentally hit your captain's knee on a face-off that was, because of forward momentum. It wasn't like he was going after his knee. But then you get Matthew Tkachuk that's just picking on Nico Hischier, or Jack Hughes when they used to, all the late hits or tripping, all that kind of stuff. And I just think it would be a deterrence when you have like a Max Domi or a Milan Lucic, on your team, because it'll just send a signal, and hopefully the rest of the team, it's not just one individual to stick up for their captain, stick up for their, franchise star and Jack Hughes, because I thought oftentimes like what Brady Tkachuk did in the All-Star game for that map, like that horse collar, tug on Jack Hughes, where Jack fell. I mean, he fell awkwardly. I mean, that could have cost Jack Hughes the season if it was just careless, completely unnecessary. And I think that needs to stop.
Well, not only needs to stop, as you said a moment ago, there needs to be some deterrent. Again, to go back to what we just talked about a few moments ago, that wouldn't happen if Scott Stevens was out there.
No, not at all. At the same time, Scott Stevens is a very unique individual that,
Yeah, but he was never dirty, though.
That's true. That's true. You make a great point about that.
I mean, people will disagree with that about his hits and everything like that. But, and I said this earlier today, too. The way he used to play, I don't know if you could play now, but he played within the framework of the rules. He was not regarded as a dirty player, and he stuck up for his teammates. That would not happen. What happened to Jack Hughes? Scott Stevens would take someone's head off if they did that.
And Scott Stevens, you got to give him credit. When he first came into the NHL, complete hothead, an offensive defenseman, he completely changed his game under Jacques Lemaire and became a better defenseman, better leader out of it. I mean, he basically rebranded himself, if you think about it.
Oh, he absolutely did. And also, really, if you think about it, the transition started when Scott got here, but also when Jacques Lemaire got here, he taught them to expect to win. They brought in the whole Canadians mentality of not it's good that you win, that you expect to win. And he did rebrand himself. And, he had an opportunity to leave. His tenure with the Devils wasn't all, smooth. When he first got here, there were some rumblings that he didn't really want to be here, and then there was some locker room stuff. But, he wanted to win. And once they started winning, the other players bought into his leadership. And, now he's got 3 rings, the banners up there. That's a real legacy. And, the players that are coming here now, that's why I said I think I would be using him to say, I did it and you can too.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, back in those days, the core leadership of Danico, Scott Stevens,
yeah,
and obviously Marty Brodeur. Marty Brodeur was very interesting when he was in net because he had that happy-go-lucky attitude, but at the same time, it's like when he needed to focus, he was focused. Like there was nobody else better in the zone than Marty Brodeur, but. Back in those trap days, if you remember, there would be like 15 minutes before he faced a shot. But when he faced that shot, Marty Brodeur was ready. Like, he was absolutely ready because you can easily, doze off back there if you don't see any shots.
Yeah, and again, going back to the, people criticize the trap. They criticize the system that Jacques Lemaire brought in. All they did during that time was win.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. That's why you play this game.
Yeah, the media was pretty harsh against the Devils way back when. Do you think they'll be harsh again?
Well, I guess it depends on what they actually do. I mean, it's been so long since they've been as relevant as they are right now. I mean, let me give you a parallel example of what we're hearing here in New England. Like right now, I think to a lot of fans of the Boston Bruins, if they don't win the Stanley Cup this year, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, you've won 43 games. I think they're 43-8 or something like that. I mean, how is anything less than a championship a successful season?
Yeah. And I don't think the Devils played that badly against Boston back in December, no?
I not only do I don't think I think they're a totally different team then.
Yeah.
And, they're a totally different team now. I mean, all you've got to do, that's the reason you play these games. All you got to do is get into the playoffs and anything can happen. There's 25, 26 games left. There can be an injury. There could be something that happens. I mean, who knows? I mean, Timo could come in here and set Jack on a 50 points, scoring streak in 28 games. I mean, they've got that kind of talent. So I don't know what the media is going to say. I mean, I think the expectations are certainly a lot higher now.
Yeah, I mean, I think they like Jack Hughes. I think everybody loves Jack Hughes. I've made this argument on the Woo Report before that in terms of marketability, Jack Hughes is much more marketable than Connor McDavid. I mean, like the way Jack, the Gato and Chill, like some of his interviews, remember, last season's All-Star game, Mini Jack, all that kind of stuff. And being a U.S. born born in Orlando, when his dad was down there, many years ago. I mean, Jack Hughes, I think in my mind, could be the face of the league.
Well, he's certainly got to be in the discussion for the Hart Trophy. I mean, I don't think he's going to win it, but I think he's certainly got to be in the discussion for it. And he's definitely the face of the franchise now. And one of the other things I was talking about earlier today is that he wants to be here. You can see that he wants to be here. And so, like with Timo being added, I mean, he seems to want to be here too. I mean, he said the right things. Early in the year, I think it was on your podcast, we were talking about, the Devils not getting Johnny Gaudreau because all of a sudden Columbus called at the last minute. How are things going for Johnny in Columbus right now? Not too good.
Not too good.
And he can stay there for all I have to say. I mean, there's a lot of things I question about a player when they do stuff like that.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a blessing in disguise because, look how prepared Tom Fitzgerald was. He had a plan B right away. Signing Palat to that deal, and a couple days later, the John Marino trade, shipping off Ty Smith, taking advantage of that. Also, the Vitek Vanacek, which I'm still thinking, like, how did he pull that one off? Vanacek has been fantastic for the Devils.
Lights out.
Yeah. Athletic goaltender. Mackenzie Blackwood, put on the IR. What are your thoughts on Schmid, Akira Schmid? I mean, he's great.
Well, before I get to that, I want to mention Blackwood because one of the things that I think New Jersey has got to figure out is Blackwood, is he your 1B guy? I think Vanacek is 1A. Is Blackwood going to be your 1B guy? Because he's been hurt a lot. He's had some games where he's really good. He's had some inconsistency. And again, this is a conversation they're going to have internally. They're certainly not going to share it with us. But I think that they're going to have to decide at some point, is he going to be their 1B guy? Because if he's not, then I think you either give Schmid the opportunity to be that guy and maybe you move Blackwood. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. But, I think at some point they've got to figure that out. I think that's the one thing that, to me anyway, as not only an analyst but a fan, that's a little uncertain to me as to where they're going with that. Because he does get hurt a lot. Yeah.
And Schmid has taken advantage of all of his opportunities. You got to give the kid credit. 7-0 shutout against the Flyers. Now, you can say what you want about the Flyers. They're in rebuild mode, obviously. But a John Tortorella team will give its best effort. And, I was expecting Tortorella to be just like having a press conference of just, a tirade, but instead he complimented the Devils. They are a good team. They are a very good team, and that was a complete game last Saturday. Enjoyed all 7 goals against the rival Flyers, right now. And, Schmid, again, I want to see more of him.
Yeah, I do want to see more of him, too. I think, again, when Blackwood comes back, is it going to be Vanacek, and are they going to use 3 goalies? I don't think that works.
No.
So is it going to be Vanacek and Schmid or Blackwood or if you're Tom Fitzgerald, how do you rectify that situation? That's a tough one.
Yeah. If Blackwood is healthy going into the playoffs, to me it's going to be Vanacek's your starter. Blackwood, do you throw a kid like Schmid in the NHL playoffs?
That's why I'm not a GM, but I think they've got to find out if this guy can play, if he's going to be able to go through a season and not get hurt, if he's going to have games. I mean, we've had some games, I believe it was the game against Nashville, where they just looked absolutely terrible. And, 4 of the 5 goals I thought were stoppable. And then you've got this Schmid kid who, as you said a moment ago, comes up here and he takes advantage of literally every opportunity. He hasn't really had too many bad games when he's played. And, I think it's good that they're pushing. And, the other variable, Sam, is if Reimer comes back, where is he in this equation?
Reimer? Which Reimer are you talking about?
What do you do with him?
Sorry, I'm drawing a blank here.
The Devils goal that was on IR.
Bernier. Not
Bernier.
Reimer.
Reimer. Sorry.
I was confused. Oh, thankfully it wasn't me. Jeez.
No, it was me.
It's later. He does a morning show, folks. Cut him some slack. Cut him some slack. Oh my goodness! Thank you for the YouTube live. You say because I was. Oh my goodness! Of course. Oh my goodness! Yeah, Bernier. Well, to me Bernier's out of the picture. Blackwood. Again, I say you ride him out this year. In situations, see how he does. But really, I'm almost writing off Blackwood at this point, knowing that Nico Dawes and Schmid, have another year under their belt compared to last year. I mean, they got thrown in the fire, the firing squad. I mean, last season's goaltending situation. How many goaltenders did the Devils go through? 7, 8?
I think 7. I believe it was 7.
7. It was just like pick out of a hat who's going to be playing in net. Almost felt like a beer league. It's just like you just get the best available. Also, they had to go to an e-bug situation as well. That's how bad it was. I believe it was Sean Shapiro. I think that was his name. That dressed. So, but right now I think Vanacek has lived up to the 3-year contract that he signed. It seems like a real steal. What did the Devils really give up? I mean, they swapped picks. They got Seamus Casey out of that second-round pick that they swapped with the Capitals for positioning, and then flipped a third back to the Capitals. I think that's a really good deal. And anything Tom Fitzgerald's touching right now turns to gold, turns to absolute gold. And even in this deal, so far, the way it looks, the way it's structured, the trade for Timo Meier, I can live with it. But there's a possibility that the Devils may not have 2 first-round draft picks in the next 2 years. What are we going to do for our draft parties, Bruce?
Well, you can always trade. You can always.
Yeah.
I think again, let's see what happens come playoff time. I mean, if they have a deep playoff run, we might be able to live without that, and especially if you're able to ink him to an 8-year extension, I think you'll be able to do without that for a year.
Yeah. And think about the players that the Devils had to give up. Fabian Zetterlund, I like these players. There was a curiosity about Shakir Mohammedoulin. But, obviously the Andre Johnson, we call him on the podcast. Obviously, that was just a dump right there for salary. Having the San Jose Sharks on the hook for 50% of Timo Meier's salary. The draft picks that they potentially give up, certainly they're probably going to be high 25 or higher. So, okay, all right. Now, I to be fair, I stated that I love those draft picks, but I can live with it at this point. And all these incentives to lose that second round conditional to a first, there's also protection there because I read somewhere that if the Devils were a one-hit wonder this season and 2024 they're in the bottom of the league, that's the lottery protected top 10, I believe, in 2024.
I think you're right about that. And, look at it this way, Sam. At the end of the day, did Tom Fitzgerald make the team better? Yes, he did.
Agreed.
And there's a cost for that.
Yeah. And I don't think that you know what? Once you look at the fine print, it wasn't that bad up until this point. Now, I'm already thinking of disaster scenario. Timo Meier gets hurt, season over. Then he starts his qualifying offer at $10 million. Turns out to be a bust. Or is he expensive rental? But I think the winning culture, I think having the Swiss connection, I think there's a lot of things that Tom Fitzgerald, I think Tom Fitzgerald, I think he gambled here, but he was very strategic about it. And I think it's a good risk, a safe bet at this point.
Yeah, I think it was a safe bet. It was a little bit of a gamble, but also for Meier, he's coming here and now, he wants to win. Well, again, this is his chance to do it. He's going to be one of the guys that they look to do that. I don't think they accomplished much in San Jose in the 6 or 7 years that he was there. And if he wants to win, well, this is his chance to do that. And, to me, if you have to give up $1 million to be on a team that may bring you a couple of rings, when you're retired, people aren't going to remember that you made $7 million instead of $8 million a year. They're going to remember that you were a Stanley Cup champion, and that's, to me, he says he wants to win. Well, let's see you do it.
Yeah, the Mohammedoulin thing, I want to just add there. There's such a curiosity about him because he's still in Russia. When he was picked 20th overall, in 2020, during the heart of the pandemic, everyone's like, WTF question mark, where is he on the board, at that point? So, that was kind of that curiosity pick. And then Fitzgerald did that with Chase Stillman as well. Again, the jury's still out on that pick as well. But it's now trading Mohammedoulin and the rest, again, it's we can move forward because we know what the defense is going to look like. It's going to be Luke Hughes. It's going to be Simon Nemitz. It's going to be Siegenthaler, Hamilton. Could you resign Ryan Graves, Damon Severson? Which one would you resign?
Well, that's a tough question because, Luke Hughes is going to be up here sooner rather than later, and it's a question of whose spot does he take. You mentioned Siegenthaler. He's been everything the Devils have asked for and more.
Yeah.
What a great addition. They've all been a great addition. I think, and I'm not necessarily sure that this is based on ability, but I think the odd man out in this situation may be Severson.
Maybe.
Because of the money.
Yeah, money. What are your thoughts on that as a fan? You know, part of me is like always frustrated with Severson, like many fans, but also part of me is kind of like, he's made it this far. Could he be like that Bruce Driver and finally win one with the team?
Well, I mean, his role has changed. I mean, he's playing a little bit less minutes. He's certainly not putting up the points that he once did, but he's still a great player. But here's the thing, like you alluded to a minute ago, Luke Hughes is coming, and I mean, we may see him by the end of this year, and he is, if he's as good as he's doing, before he becomes into the NHL, he's going to be here, and I think when he comes, he's here to stay. So whose spot does he take? I mean, maybe it is Graves. I'm not sure, but I like Graves as a player. I think he's been a good addition. That's a decision that I'm glad I don't have to make.
Yeah, at the same time, I mean, transferring from the collegiate level, ending your sophomore year into the NHL playoffs, it's crazy to think.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you're hearing down there, Sam, but I mean, there's been people up here that I talk to a lot about hockey that are making comparisons between Luke Hughes and Cale Makar already.
Really?
Yeah, I mean that's a heck of a comparison to put on a kid that's never played an NHL game yet. But he's supposedly that good. So,
well, he's got the pedigree. I mean, heck, look at his two brothers, right?
Yeah.
It could happen, folks. I'm just looking at the YouTube live where Ryan says, I love Sevo, want him to win with the team, but Luke Hughes is coming in New Jersey. If New Jersey can trade Severson and add Luke Schenn, they should do it. I was talking to a few friends of mine about the Vancouver connection, possibly shipping over Severson. Luke Schenn is one of those players that I've been talking about on the podcast. Do you think, I'm just spitballing here. Do you think you make a trade with Vancouver to bring Besser and Schenn and add them to this lineup? Is there enough ammunition to send over?
Well, the whole Vancouver situation, that organization's a mess right now.
Yeah. Yep.
And, I mean, if I was an NHL player, I don't know that I would want to play there, to be honest with you. I mean, just hearing about some of the just, I don't know, disorganization that's going on there. I mean, it's like a fire sale, and it doesn't ever seem really to get better. I mean, if you look at that organization, I mean, they had the Sedin brothers, and they never really got over that hump. And so, then they had that whole situation with Bruce Boudreau this year and the way they treated him. That was a disgrace.
But the way the fans treated him that last game was was something else. Got to give the fans credit.
It was pretty classy, but
yeah.
I mean, this is supposed to be the National Hockey League. That stuff shouldn't happen here. But I mean, Bruce Boudreau's a class act. He'll be back before you know it. Do I make that deal if you can get something that's financially beneficial that won't take a big chunk out of your cap? I think I would do that deal. But I don't know. Severson, he may be here. After the trade deadline, he may not go anywhere. I mean, Schenn is a pretty physical player. He's a winner, and we'll see. But Brock Besser, I mean, he may be stuck there because now I think the Devils have their guy.
Yeah, they have their guy. Yep, they have their guy. And I just want to read a text from a friend of mine. It says that the skating gurus say that Luke Hughes is the best skater out of all the Hughes brothers. Definitely taller, will fill out. Could be, I mean, if that's true, that's insane because I already have both Quinn and Jack in high regard. But if Luke Hughes is the best out of the three, that's something, that's crazy.
Well, like I said, I've heard from a couple NHL analysts that I talked to that he's already drawing comparisons to Makar because of the way he sees the ice and he plays the game. I mean, if you add that variable to the Devils team, they're a dangerous franchise, moving forward.
And you go back the year 2021 when he was drafted 4th overall. It was Owen Power, right? Number 1 that year. Who was number 2 and 3? Do you remember? I can't remember the top of my head. I have to look at that draft. But here's Luke Hughes sitting at 4, and when just seeing Jack's reaction, like he was more excited than Luke was being drafted in New Jersey, and that could be, again, it's like that's the future is so bright in New Jersey right now. Like you have to be happy. Like you have to be happy about the whole Timo Meier thing because it wasn't as bad as I thought. You gave up a few, decent players with some decent upside for the future, but they didn't really they didn't overextend themselves. Let's put it that way in this deal.
No, and it was a great deal by Tom Fitzgerald in getting him. I mean, the future is very bright. I'm so excited. I mean, this is the first time I think since 2012 that we're going to be talking about playoffs. How exciting is that?
Yeah, and how exciting is it going to be, Bruce? And I've said this on the podcast many times. The way it's looking right now, the Devils will have game one at home after being all that pent-up energy, all that suffering, except for that 1 year where we just got fool's gold out of Taylor Hall. But now we know it's for real. Prudential Center. Imagine if it's Devils Rangers.
Oh,
and
God.
You've got Jack Hughes, Timo Meier, and Jesper Bratt on the ice with Dougie Hamilton and Siegenthaler, Vanacek and net. And can you imagine the absolute speed? I hope they have the ice ready that night, Prudential Center, because that's speed. I mean, Bruce, I was there with my wife on November 23rd when the Devils had that 13-game winning streak snapped. That was a late round playoff atmosphere. It rivaled the Devils-Rangers series in 2012, and that was a regular season game because it had all the elements. It was the day before Thanksgiving. A lot of drinking was going on, not at 5 o'clock, but probably at 2 o'clock as everybody got off to work. American whiskey was just out of control that night. It was a holly jolly night. And it had, the booing, let's put it this way. I've been to a lot of sporting events in my life. Up until then, the loudest booing I ever heard was at Shea Stadium when John Rocker came back after the words he said. I mean, it was so loud that you can't hear the next person talk to you because the booing was so loud. It was in open air. The booing that night was louder than what I experienced at Shea Stadium, of booing, because of the goals called back. It was just venom. It felt like you had that streak taken from you. Devils fans just weren't going to have it and gave the jersey out. I know you're not supposed to throw stuff on the ice. I know, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, the Maple Leafs made it look like, we committed murder. It's not like they don't do that kind of crap in Toronto either, but just saying. It was an amazing time. Even though they lost, it was just like, if that was just like a little glimpse of what's going to happen in New Jersey, and especially with the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, that home game one, you got to be there. It is going to be loud, absolutely loud.
I can't wait. I cannot wait.
You got to get down here, Bruce. You definitely got to get down here.
I'm going to come down there. I'm going to do one of the Woo reports with you from the Prudential Center.
Yeah, you should. You got to come to American Whiskey. Let me tell you, that place is like it's the official home game bar of the Let's Go Devils podcast. We had Taylor Hamburgers the other night. I joke around about this, but You know how, like, some bars you may kick the keg or, they run out of the.
Yeah.
We kicked the milk because all the mudslides were gone. Like, there were so many mudslides for whatever reason was sold at the bar. So mudslides were gone. It was just amazing time on Saturday. I mean, Scotty and I were just like, I knew Scotty was exhausted, but a lot of fans wanted to see Scotty. And just knowing that he came out to L.A. to our party was just it was the first time all of us were really together, except for Vinny Parisi. That was actually the first time, like, Shorts Guy had never met Scotty before in person. It was all virtual.
Wow.
All virtual. Isn't that funny? It's just amazing.
Crazy. Well, I'll get down there soon, I promise you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything to plug before we go?
No, it's great to be with you. I'm going to try to do it more often. I mean, my show up here is keeping me pretty busy. I do it with the dogs, Calvin and Zoe, in the morning, and we got a couple of kids books coming out and everything. We're getting ready to do another tour. So, we're in my free time, I like to talk hockey with you.
Oh yeah, I love the texts. Good stuff, and always reminiscing the old days. And but you didn't mind if I told the fans that you used to be the Devils mascot years ago. I mean, you showed me the pictures.
That I'm not the guy that got in trouble.
Yeah, he wasn't Slapshot, folks.
No, I didn't sit in. I didn't get to sit in the paddy wagon. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, I've heard stories about that guy. Like, I know some people down in Phil. I think he's from Philadelphia, isn't he?
I'm not really sure. All I know is that I wound up in Mr. Lamoriello's office, and they said, "We need your help," and I just helped out.
Did you replace him, or no?
Well, I replaced the guy that replaced him.
Gotcha.
And there was a few bumps in the road before that happened, and let's just say that they gave him every opportunity to make it work, and it didn't. So I kind of became the full-time guy for a couple of years.
It's sad that guy was ever employed, because the actual mascot, like the costume itself, is pretty freaking cool. It's just.
I'll tell you though, Sam, it's hot.
Is it?
Oh, you see out of the mouth, and it was one of the best times of my life. Though I got to meet a lot of great people. I had a lot of players laugh at me. They're like, "You're not really wearing that thing, are you?" And so I guess I earned my keep.
You definitely did, and thank you for that NJ Devil hockey stick, the Carvel ice cream Devils hockey stick that you gave me that was actually used at Brendan Byrne Arena, Bruce's time as the mascot. It's actually sitting in my office. I should probably bring it to America Whiskey to show people. But Bruce, thank you so much for coming on to the Woo Report. This is Bruce Zeman, from the host of the Wake Up Crew with Bruce and Friends on 92.1 WVTK FM in Vermont, and also NHL analyst, Vox Media AM/FM. Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for all those tuning in, dropping the podcast at midnight. By the way, thank you, Devils fans, because today was a record day for the Let's Go Devils podcast, as we broke our daily record for most downloads in one day. Check out our podcast pages at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music Prime, Audible, iHeart app, and also we put up Arlette's rendition of America the Beautiful, audio remastered by yours truly, Sam Wu, up on our podcast pages. You got to play it if you're especially if you're patriotic. America the Beautiful by Arlette. Thank you, Bruce. Till next time, let's go Devils.